Vercingetorix, the most famous of the Gauls, a symbol of resistance, a national hero. His name has echoed through the ages. But what do we really know about him? Behind the legend of the wild-haired warrior lies a very different story. Because the man who dared to defy Caesar was far more than a rebel.
He was clearly a highly accomplished diplomat, given that he managed to unite an army of considerable size.
He achieved something unprecedented, an alliance, a federation of Gauls that had never existed before. From that standpoint, he's truly remarkable.
A political leader and a military strategist of rare talent.
Vercingetorix was a great leader, arguably the first great leader in our national history.
And surprisingly, this young commander was probably trained in Roman military methods. Far from the barbarian stereotype, Vercingetorix was highborn, educated, and fiercely ambitious.
We know he was born into the Arvernian aristocracy. We know he was extremely wealthy. He came from one of the most powerful lineages.
And when he rallied the Gaelic tribes against Caesar and his legions, his power reached its peak.
From the moment Vercingetorix enters the war, Caesar starts to face real trouble.
Caesar and Vercingetorix, two men locked in a fight to the death, one to subdue all of Gaul, the other to set it free. 3 battles would decide their fate. Gergovia.
And at that moment, no one could really be sure how the conflict would end.
Avaricum, where the siege would be merciless. And finally, Alesia.
This is the climax. This is where it all ends, for one side or the other.
And the only traces of his story come from his enemy, Caesar's own writings, chronicling months of battles, betrayals, and strategy.
Screams on both sides. It's a massacre. We must hold our ground.
Caesar is forced to admit that Vercingetorix is a great leader. Again and again, he says that Vercingetorix is fighting for liberty.
In just a few months, Vercingetorix left an indelible mark on French history. Today, archaeologists and historians are finally revealing the man behind the legend. Who was he? Where did he come from? And how did this unknown chieftain end up challenging Caesar? Gergovia, 52 BC. A decisive battle is taking shape. Romans against Gauls. A confrontation that would see Caesar defeated for the first time. A stunning setback. For 6 years, Caesar and his legions had been trying to subjugate all of Gaul. Just as he seemed on the verge of success, a formidable opponent rose up against him. Vercingetorix, a young leader commanding the largest Gaelic army ever assembled. With 80,000 men, he was ready to drive out the invader once and for all. Across from the ramparts of Gergovia stood Caesar and his 60,000 legionnaires, highly trained and heavily equipped. The proconsul was convinced that victory here would crush the Gaelic revolt. But nothing was certain. The battle would be fought at Gergovia, deep in the Arvernian territory, where Vercingetorix and his people had now turned against Rome. He was fighting on his own turf.
Here we are on the southeast rampart of the Oppidum of Gergovia. And this may well be where Vercingetorix, or at least the Gallic High Command, surveyed the Roman positions down below.
Just a few hundred meters away, Caesar and his legions were ready to attack.
This is what Caesar could see from the northern part of the Grand Camp, the Oppidum of Gergovia. This high ground is decisive. It really is an impregnable fortress. The site is naturally fortified. There's a steep drop, And it must have been even more intimidating with Gallic warriors positioned on the nearby ridge and along the slope.
Gergovia sits 400 meters above sea level with ramparts more than 2 meters high encircling the settlement. The Gauls, spread both inside and outside the walls, waited for the enemy. At the same time, additional walls were built into the slope to slow the Roman climb.
From the outset, Caesar realized he was at a disadvantage. It was clear enough. He was in enemy territory, and he was isolated.
Was Caesar trapped? The advantage lay with Vercingetorix, and Gergovia was not the only stronghold. Nearby Gondol and Corinth also hemmed in the Roman camp.
When Caesar arrived at the foot of Gergovia, he admitted it to himself. He had made a serious mistake. He had not surveyed the site in advance. In other words, he had not planned to fight here, which means Vercingetorix had drawn him in. Militarily, Caesar was trapped, pinned below 3 fortresses, each packed with fighting men.
He takes in the site and realizes it is so well defended that he will never be able to take it by direct assault. It catches him off guard.
Vercingetorix, a young Arvernian who had been unknown just a few months earlier, was now close to destabilizing the most powerful army in the world. And Caesar began to doubt himself.
He thought, uh-oh, this is worse than I expected. But Caesar had been in many tight spots before. I mean, think about the Battle of the Sabus early in the Gallic Wars. And I think he expected that his prestige and the talent of the Roman soldiers would win the day. No doubt he knew that Vercingetorix was young and inexperienced compared to him. And I think he thought that he would succeed. He thought that he would break through.
Caesar was a gambler. That's what makes him so surprising and, in a way, admirable. Even when the odds were against him, the challenge seemed to energize him. He knew that until a game is played to the very end, it's not lost. Even when dealt a bad hand, as long as the game was not over, it was neither won nor lost.
Caesar refused to accept defeat. He set up a small camp at the foot of the ramparts and linked it to his main camp with a trench hidden under branches and leaves. The goal was simple: to conceal the movement of his troops. Vercingetorix had no idea that 2 Roman legions were now positioned at the foot of Gergovia, ready to strike. And against all odds, Caesar, confident in his own strength, ordered the assault.
Caesar made a tactical misjudgment, a rookie error. You never attack uphill. By the time the soldiers reach the top, they're out of breath and no longer in fighting shape. Meanwhile, the men on higher ground can pick off the attackers below.
Attacking uphill is almost always doomed to fail, and the attackers suffer enormous losses.
Caesar was sure of himself. He believed he was invincible. But he had not reckoned with Vercingetorix's military talent, revealed here through a formidable strategy.
This is a classic battlefield tactic, the hammer and anvil. The anvil is the large plateau where Vercingetorix positioned his main force.
And he left troops outside to act as the hammer. The Romans could then be caught in a pincer movement, trapped between the anvil on the plateau and the hammer striking from outside.
The idea was to pin Caesar on the anvil. That's where the name comes from.
For the first time, Caesar seemed cornered. But the proconsuls still believed victory was within his grasp. He was counting on the imminent arrival of 10,000 Aedui, Gauls who were long-standing allies of Rome.
The Aedui were Rome's traditional allies. They even upheld an ancient myth that cast them as the Romans' blood brothers.
But when they arrived, everything unraveled.
Vercingetorix most likely relied on diplomacy, using contacts and negotiations with Aedui leaders.
When they arrived, they went straight to Vercingetorix's camp. They were no longer supporting Caesar.
It was the final blow. Caesar had underestimated Vercingetorix's diplomatic skill.
It was a total failure. It was chaos.
Caesar's troops broke ranks. The retreat turned into panic.
In the end, he lost the equivalent of a full legion. And when I say a legion, you have to include the auxiliaries. You're talking about 9,000 to 10,000 men. That's enormous, nearly 20% of his forces.
So he was in an extremely unfavorable position. And Gergovia is really where the war turned. For the first time, Caesar was defeated. And for the first time, he no longer had the advantage.
What is certain is that after Gergovia, almost all the peoples of Gaul joined the revolt. The war had reached a turning point.
And it was Vercingetorix who made that happen. He shifted the balance of power.
A shrewd military strategist and a skilled politician who had won over the Aedui, Vercingetorix now stood at the head of a coalition unlike anything Gaul had seen before. Vercingetorix, the man who dared to stand up to Caesar. But who is he? Where does he come from? To understand how he did it, we have to go back 6 years to 58 BC. At that time, Gaul was made up of more than 60 different peoples.
Gaul was never a unified nation. It was more like a mosaic of peoples, a patchwork of city-states. Think medieval counties or duchies. These groups were often at war with one another. Alliances formed from time to time, but so did local conflicts, raids, and pillaging.
Most of these peoples were pro-Roman, including two of the most powerful, the Arverni and the Aedui. But Caesar wanted to subjugate all of Gaul by force. So he launched a major military campaign.
Caesar was ambitious. He wanted power. He was positioning himself in the great tradition of Roman generals. And one way to gain power, wealth, and influence was through military victories.
Caesar knows that he is fighting for his political life back in Rome. And he knows that he has to win in Gaul. He can't possibly afford a failure. He knew that his enemies would be gunning for him, to use an anachronism, when he got back to Italy. And he knew that any mistakes he made, any defeats he had, would be used against him. All the more reason why he couldn't give up.
Caesar wanted triumph for glory, power, and money. So he recorded his exploits in campaign journals. One book for each year of conquest. Battles, betrayals, military strategy, nothing was left out. Collected together, these accounts would become a classic of antiquity, the Gallic Wars.
It's a narrative with an obvious political purpose. Caesar had to report back to the Senate, and he later drew on those dispatches to write the Gallic Wars, shaping them into a single work.
He meant to impress the Roman people and to show them both how much he had achieved, how great the opposition was, and how far he had advanced the glory, the power, the wealth, the security of the people of Rome.
By Book 6, Roman victory seemed assured.
For the first 6 years in Gaul, Caesar went from victory to victory. Everything was going his way because he exploited divisions between the different peoples. Each group was a kind of microstate, with its own foreign policy, its own alliances, and Caesar took full advantage of that.
By 52 BC, the Romans occupied all of Gaul. 10 legions, more than 60,000 men, were deployed across the territory. Caesar wrote,
Calm had returned to Gaul, and Caesar set out for Italy as planned.
But then, Book 7 opens with the arrival of an extraordinary opponent.
Vercingetorix appears at a moment when, for Caesar, everything is practically settled. He's about to return to Rome, celebrate his triumph, and reap the political rewards. And then suddenly, this revolt erupts where no one expects it, among the Arverni, a people Rome considered allies. And it's led by this young Arvernian chief.
He seems to come out of nowhere. I think this is a dramatic entrance. As in an opera, that suddenly somebody appears and starts singing a very powerful aria, and you say, wow, where did this come from?
What you see in Caesar's account is that from the moment Vercingetorix enters the war, Caesar starts to face real trouble. Up to that point, everything's going well for the Roman army. But with Vercingetorix, Caesar has to fight on two fronts, not only offensive campaigns, but defensive ones as well.
His name appears for the first time in recorded history. Caesar writes,
Vercingetorix, son of Celtius, was a very powerful young Arvernian.
Corinth, the capital of the Arverni, just a few kilometers from Gergovia. This is where Vercingetorix is believed to have lived.
Vercingetorix likely grew up in Corinth, the capital. He probably spent part of his life there, because it was the heart of Arvernian life, their main sanctuary, their assembly place, and their largest marketplace for trade and exchange.
This is a far cry from the image of rough Gauls living in huts. Gaelic cities could rival Roman ones.
The Arverni were allies of Caesar in Gaul. They supplied his armies with fodder and provisions, and may even have backed Rome in certain battles.
Vercingetorix's family was among the richest and most powerful in the city. But tragedy struck.
When Vercingetorix's father, an aristocrat, entered politics, we're told he wanted to become king. That's what Caesar says when he introduces Vercingetorix. And because of that ambition, that desire for monarchical power, he was assassinated by other aristocrats, and even by his own brother, Vercingetorix's uncle.
After his father's assassination, Vercingetorix's life changed overnight. He was probably sent to the Romans.
It's very likely that Vercingetorix's uncle sent him to the Romans as a kind of guarantee of neutrality.
It's as if he said, I'm handing you my nephew. Do with him what you will. It may also have been a way to get rid of a young man who was already a handful.
What happened during this period? What was Vercingetorix doing? And what was his relationship with the Romans?
It is entirely possible, even very likely, that Vercingetorix, like other young Arvernian nobles and Gaelic elites, fought alongside Roman armies, perhaps even in their ranks, and that he learned combat and siege techniques he would later use at the end of the Gaelic Wars.
It's very likely that, for several years and several campaigns, Vercingetorix was close to Caesar, close enough, perhaps, to form a relationship, even a kind of friendship. We don't know for how long, of course.
This theory, even if it cannot be proven today, would explain his strategic skill and his intimate knowledge of the Roman army's strengths and weaknesses. In 53 BC, for reasons unknown, Vercingetorix returned to Gergovia for the first time since his father's assassination. And this is where everything would change.
Caesar says something interesting. He writes that Vercingetorix began roaming the countryside, gathering brigands, outlaws, and criminals around him. What you have to picture is the start of a small band of supporters. To me, it looks a lot like the resistance. You begin by bringing together a mixed group, peasants, people with different political views, and that becomes the core of the movement.
He returns to the city and seizes power. It's effectively a coup. It's also a reversal of alliances. In other words, the Arverni, who had initially been pro-Roman, officially turn against Rome, for better or for worse.
He urged them to take up arms for the freedom of all of Gaul. His people proclaimed him king.
The Cadurci, the Turoni, the Olerci, the Lemovici, and many other Gaelic peoples joined Vercingetorix. In just a few weeks, he became the face of Gaelic resistance. A massive statue still stands on the plateau of Burgundy. Erected in the 19th century, it depicts the man who defied Caesar, the man who unified the peoples of Gaul.
The statue of Vercingetorix, not far from here on the plateau of Alesia, is a 19th century reconstruction commissioned by Napoleon III. He even gave it his own features, mustache included. The costume, though, is actually Merovingian, so we should not imagine the Gauls bare-chested. It's not very practical for fighting.
So what did Vercingetorix really look like? Portraits of Caesar are everywhere, but of the Gaelic leader, none survive. Was he a wild-haired brute, a savage warrior, or a Romanized politician? At the end of the 19th century, an unexpected discovery would change everything, finally putting a face to the name.
A coin hoard was discovered, a cache of gold coins minted in Vercingetorix's name. They show the profile of a young man with a determined look, a detail that sparked intense debate. He has curly hair, cut fairly short, and no mustache.
Caught between the mustached barbarian and the refined Romanized noble, archaeologists now seem to be leaning towards the latter.
For me, if I had to picture Vercingetorix, it would be closer to the coin minted in his name than to the images we see in the 19th century paintings, which are purely artistic inventions. I think that takes us much closer to reality. A Gaelic aristocrat whose customs were already largely Romanized, with short hair, clean-shaven, no mustache. In the end, he could almost pass for a Roman aristocrat. He would not look out of place in the Roman Senate.
And while his appearance remains partly a mystery, there is no doubt about his age when he enters the story.
It's suggested he was born in the 80s BC, because Caesar calls him an adolescence, which means he was under 30 when he appears in the narrative, so a young man.
As for the name Vercingetorix, that too is debated.
Is it really a proper name or a title? Historians disagree. It's unlikely he carried the name from childhood. It seems to designate a leader of warriors, the one who marches at the head of the armies. So it's more likely a war title, perhaps adopted when he forged the Great Coalition at the end of the Gaelic Wars.
So Vercingetorix was young, aristocratic, and well-groomed, and his campaigns reveal a remarkable character.
He had extraordinary charisma. He could rally crowds around him.
I think he's a very great soldier. He's a very great leader. He wants to save his country. He wants to save them from the enemy invader. And he puts together a heroic effort to do so.
He did not undertake this war for his own ends, but to liberate Gaul. This is one of the earliest known acts of resistance in history. He fought oppression. He fought for freedom, not just for his own people, but for all of Gaul. And that is why Vercingetorix still matters.
4 months before the Battle of Gergovia, Vercingetorix was proclaimed supreme king, leading an army drawn from multiple Gaelic peoples. Hope was reborn.
Vercingetorix managed to unite around 30 peoples. That represents hundreds of thousands of men. So the plan to drive the Romans out of Gaul was not some utopian dream. It was within reach.
Vercingetorix, through sheer intelligence, managed to bring this revolt together, organize it militarily, and show that there was a tactic to defeat the Romans. It was possible to beat them.
Facing him were 10 Roman legions, more than 60,000 men, deployed mainly in eastern Gaul. Vercingetorix wanted to push them south. To do that, he used tactics designed to unsettle his opponent.
I think Vercingetorix understood from the start that he could not defeat the Roman army in a single battle. So the only solution was to wear it down over time. Today, we would call it guerrilla warfare. Ambushes, surprise attacks, fighting at night, and whenever a Roman straggled off somewhere, he was seized and made to disappear.
From that point on, it became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Caesar pursued Vercingetorix, determined to destroy him. And Vercingetorix responded with a strategy designed to wear Caesar down, one that came at a terrible cost: scorched earth.
Alongside this hit-and-run warfare, Vercingetorix ordered the Gauls to burn farms, crops, and towns, everything in the path of Caesar's legions. The goal was to starve the Romans out.
He tells the Gauls very clearly, to defeat the Romans, you have to destroy the supplies. He says we are going to have a terrible year, a dreadful year, but it's the price we must pay to be free.
Vercingetorix understood this was the Romans' weak point. That is where you apply pressure. You deprive them of food, you weaken them, and when they're completely exhausted, then you crush them.
Vercingetorix conceived a strategy unlike anything seen before, a stroke of genius. What historians would later call a scorched earth policy.
You can see he had thought this war through. He had strategic and tactical ideas you do not find among his predecessors.
And it worked. The 60,000 legionnaires were cut off from their supplies, with no choice but to push farther south. They entered enemy territory, the land of the Bituriges, in the heart of Gaul.
This was a war to the death. Caesar wanted to finish it once and for all, to cut off the head of Vercingetorix's resistance. And Vercingetorix understood that.
The scorched earth strategy continued except for one town, Avaricum. Against Vercingetorix's advice, its inhabitants refused to burn it.
That suggests this scorched earth policy was difficult to impose among the Gauls. And at that moment, Vercingetorix's authority was, at least to some extent, being challenged.
Vercingetorix did not want to defend Avaricum. He wanted it to be abandoned, to be destroyed. He knew that it was a potential source of supply to the Romans, and he probably knew that it wasn't all that defensible. I think it was a wise move on his part. He's forced by politics, not by military logic, to defend Avaricum.
Forced to spare the city, Vercingetorix pulled his forces back outside and left the inhabitants to defend themselves.
Avaricum is a fortified city. The Gauls said it is extremely well defended, and they're right. Short of provisions, Caesar is forced to lay siege to the city, a siege that would wear him down and his troops with him.
Caesar set up camp with 30,000 men on the only open ground, but in front of him lay a vast ditch dug by the Gauls, more than 25 meters deep and 100 meters wide. Impassable.
I think he did think it could have been a trap, but I guess he thought it was a risk worth taking because, after all, he had to feed his army. When he talks about the siege of Avaricum, he talks about his men. He says that their supplies were running very low, and Caesar apologized to them. He said that he sympathized. Maybe we need to withdraw, he said. And the men say, no, no, Caesar. No, we want to fight.
Caesar knew he had to shorten the siege at any cost, so he launched major earthworks to fill in the ditch. A colossal task.
Caesar says it himself. His troops are suffering from food shortages. It's an absolutely brutal siege for the Romans. They're literally starving.
Avaricum holds out. More than 20 days have passed, and Caesar begins to waver.
They were hungry. There was nothing left. The entire army was in distress. They were at the breaking point.
But an unexpected event would change everything.
Victory often depends on chance. A huge storm breaks out.
The Gauls, Caesar tells us, are deeply religious and deeply superstitious. There are accounts of them halting the fight during a violent downpour, taking it as a bad omen.
The Gauls take shelter, and the Romans seize the moment. They scale the ramparts and take Avaricum.
Avaricum fell, and its fate would be horrific.
They spared no one. Not the old, not women, not children. Caesar says around 800 people escaped out of 40,000. That means 39,200 were killed. This is slaughter, a massacre. A massacre meant to force submission. The goal is to impose terror, to break local support for Vercingetorix's resistance. It has to be brutal.
For the Gauls, the defeat was crushing, and Vercingetorix blamed it on one mistake: sparing Avaricum.
Vercingetorix had advised against defending the city. That was the clear judgment of a commander who had read the situation correctly. He warned the inhabitants they would not be able to hold Avaricum, and he refused to commit his army, avoiding the Roman trap.
That clear vision earned him recognition among the Gaelic peoples as a great commander. He then delivered a memorable speech, reported by Caesar in his book.
He would do everything to rally the cities that had remained outside the general movement so that all of Gaul would march as one. Against a united Gaul, the whole world would be powerless.
The message spread far beyond the region, carried to Gaelic cities everywhere.
He's a statesman in the fullest sense. He understands what Gaul is, and he knows how to organize resistance politically. He's also a gifted speaker and a genuinely admirable figure.
Even Caesar is surprised.
Usually, setbacks weaken the commander. Here it was the opposite. The more he lost, the more prestige he gained.
Vercingetorix now found himself at the head of more than 100,000 men. He left the land of the Bituriges and made for Gergovia, with Caesar and his legions in pursuit.
He faces a problem. He manages to make Caesar pursue him because he wants to draw him to Gergovia. Caesar does not realize that he's being lured there. But Vercingetorix needs time. He cannot arrive at Gergovia at the same moment as the Romans. He needs days to fortify the site, build a wall along the slope to prevent assaults, organize the camps, and draw up the battle plan. So he needs a head start. That's why bridges are destroyed and why obstacles are put in place to slow the Romans chasing him.
He had a few days' lead. Vercingetorix moved fast. Caesar did too, but he did not catch him. And when Caesar arrived at Gergovia, Vercingetorix was already there with his troops, and with allies too, something people often forget.
Vercingetorix gained several days, enough to prepare for the decisive battle at Gergovia, on his own land, with his own forces. The battle that would bring him victory.
The victory at Gergovia earned Vercingetorix the title of Supreme Commander of the Gaelic armies.
After Gergovia, Vercingetorix and Caesar were locked in a ruthless struggle. The battle that could decide everything would come just 2 months later.
What does Vercingetorix do next? He builds up his army until it reaches about 95,000 men. Caesar does the same. Caesar knows he is heading toward a final outcome, so he brings in 2 additional legions.
Vercingetorix then headed for Lygia, drawing his enemy after him.
Caesar reads the situation. He sees the oppidum is well protected and decides not to attack Vercingetorix or the town of Alesia directly. Instead, he lays siege. His legionaries encircle Alesia, taking advantage of the surrounding hills. You can see them over there, with the ridges on the other side at roughly the same height. That allows the Romans to place camps on high ground and keep Alesia, the oppidum, and everything inside it under watch.
Caesar realizes that, as at Gergovia, he cannot take the stronghold by direct assault. So the only solution is to organize a blockade and force surrender through starvation.
This time, Caesar prepared the siege carefully, ready to maintain it for months if necessary.
He deploys truly massive siege works. He encircles the site. The terrain is more favorable because the position is lower. and it is surrounded by a series of high points where he can place camps and lines of fortification. And he's patient.
15 kilometers of fortifications, with an embankment more than 8 meters high and towers for observation.
We are standing where the Gallic city of Alesia once stood. Imagine this wide plateau, 97 hectares, with the city established on it. During the siege, Vercingetorix takes refuge here. On all sides, he can watch the camps being set up around him. He can also see the fortifications rising and closing in. It must have felt suffocating because on that side and over there as well, he can see Caesar's camp and the lines of fortification. He can see the trap tightening.
Vercingetorix launched regular attacks to slow the construction of the Roman fortifications. In vain. For the moment, neither side gained the upper hand.
I think there was deep uncertainty in both camps, because there had already been two major battles, Avaricum and Jargovia. One was a defeat, the other a victory. And at that moment, no one could truly be sure how the conflict would end. On the eve of the Battle of Alesia, I think the situation still leaned in Vercingetorix's favor.
80,000 Gauls against 50,000 legionnaires. To tip the balance in his favor, Vercingetorix returned to the strategy that had worked at Jargovia, the hammer and anvil.
Vercingetorix saw Alesia as the anvil, impregnable at the time. No legionary could have scaled it. And he meant to crush the Roman army between that anvil and a hammer, the relief force.
You know, he's dynamic, he's strategic. Alesia is a very defensible site. It's an excellent site for defense. And he's got these allies. He's got the cavalrymen who are coming to the rescue, just like in a Hollywood Western.
This time, Vercingetorix had planned something on an entirely different scale, a massive relief army, as many as 250,000 Gauls, more warriors than had been seen at any point in the war.
That meant the Romans would be outnumbered at Alesia. They are fighting at a ratio of roughly 1 to 7. About 40,000 to 50,000 men spread along a ring 15 kilometers long. So imagine this. You're attacked in one place, and you're at the other end. How do you respond? It's extremely complicated.
Caesar learned from his spies that the relief force was approaching.
Caesar reads the situation immediately. At Alesia, he sees the hammer and anvil tactic taking shape, and he prepares accordingly.
So he reinforces the first line by building a second line of fortifications facing outward, an outer ring of defenses, so he can meet the relief army he has been warned is being assembled.
It's what the Romans are very good at. The Romans are really good at digging and building defenses, and that's what it requires in the end to win. So in a way, it's playing to Caesar's strengths.
This second line of fortifications stretched across the valley for more than 22 kilometers, linking even the most distant Roman camps. In the end, the two rings of defenses seemed almost impregnable.
This is where the Romans would have positioned themselves. You're protected on both sides by fortifications built by the legionaries. You can see the towers they could climb to keep watch, spot the Gauls approaching in the distance, anticipate an attack, and begin to defend themselves.
Caesar knew this battle was crucial.
Gaul was united in its desire to fight for its freedom and regain its old reputation as a warrior people.
This is a true clash of warriors, Gallic fighters against Roman legionaries. These are armies here to settle it once or for all. Everything will be decided here. This entire war in Gaul that Julius Caesar has been waging is reaching its conclusion. This is where it all ends, for one side or the other.
Days pass, then weeks. The Gauls are still waiting for the relief force. Inside Alesia, problems begin.
Inside the Oppidum, supplies are starting to run short. You can sense the situation deteriorating.
At some point, the civilian population must have been leaning toward surrender. Vercingetorix did not accept that, so he told them, in effect, if you want to surrender, then out you go, everyone out.
And those people will meet a terrible fate, trapped between the Oppidum of Alesia and the Roman fortifications. Caesar, of course, will not spare them. He will not let them through the siege lines. He will leave them to die in full view of Vercingetorix. This is psychological warfare. It suits him to have Vercingetorix and his warriors watch the civilians die before their eyes.
6 weeks later, the relief army finally arrives. Attacks come one after another to break Caesar's lines. The relief force and Vercingetorix fight day and night on multiple fronts without pause. Hope remains. They can still crush Caesar and his legions.
Screams on both sides. It's a massacre. We must hold our ground. Today, right now, the outcome of all the previous fighting is being decided.
Vercingetorix and his forces make one final attempt to break through the Roman lines, in vain. After 7 days of brutal fighting, the fate of the Gauls seems sealed.
The battle fails. The relief army pulls back. It has no choice because it has already been there for a week. And if you look at this war overall, after a week, armies have exhausted their supplies. There's nothing left. So the relief force withdraws, and Vercingetorix is left alone with his own army.
What doomed Vercingetorix was bad luck to begin with. And also the fact that the Gallic army is not fighting as a state. There is no state, so there's no state-level firepower. It's a war of resistance. What do you do when you're facing an enemy that is extremely organized, extremely powerful, and you do not have that kind of force? I think that is also why he's defeated.
Vercingetorix is certainly the first great leader in our history, a great military leader. But luck was not on his side. That is the bottom line. That is how it played out.
It is the end of the Gallic uprising and the end of Vercingetorix.
Vercingetorix is handed over. Weapons are thrown down.
In a single sentence, Caesar ends the story of Vercingetorix. He would never write his name again.
Caesar's description of Vercingetorix's end, both his decision to surrender, the nobility of his decision to surrender, to spare his people any further suffering, and the way in which he surrenders to Caesar. It's a very dignified end. He just comes to Caesar, throws down his arms, and that's the end of the story.
6 years after his surrender, Vercingetorix died in a Roman prison. Caesar believed he had erased his enemy's name from history. Yet, at the end of the 19th century, a painting caused a sensation. At its center, on horseback, Vercingetorix is shown, dignified, laying down his arms to save his people. Through that surrender, the painting also reflects France's own defeat by Prussia. Vercingetorix becomes a symbol of nobility in the face of an invader.
Vercingetorix is the hero who defends freedom for everyone. That's why he still lives on, in a sense. Caesar is long gone, but his legend still captivates those who admire power. It is no surprise that dictatorial regimes have claimed him as a hero.
Caesar's not fighting for freedom. Caesar's fighting for power, his own power and the glory and power of the Roman Empire, which unjustly conquers these free people of Gaul. Vercingetorix is a very noble figure.
Far from the caricature of the unkempt, uncivilized Gaul, Vercingetorix developed a style of warfare all his own. A skilled political leader, he managed to unite divided cities behind a single cause, and he handed Rome its first major defeat.
It was freedom or death. He fought for his freedom, choosing death over slavery.
He is a hero who lost, but who tried, which is more than can be said for many.